Remember like 2 weeks ago when everybody was mad at Cursor for changing their price tiers and they were saying you should move to Claude Code because it's way cheaper and you get much more for the money? I do, and I tried to give y'all a warning that that wasn't going to last. There is no such thing as free lunch in a GPU-powered industry that costs as much money as it does to run this inference. That said, you guys seemed to think that the $200 a month tier would get you covered with Claude Code. And I'm excited to tell you guys today, you were wrong. The free lunch is over. Anthropic is now rolling out weekly limits for Claude Pro and Max users at the end of next month. This is a very overdue course correction that I honestly have been anticipating for a while. The things I've seen people doing with Claude Code are absolutely crazy, and those super power users were costing tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not exaggerating. They said it themselves. Some of the biggest Claude Code fans are running it continuously in the background 24/7. These uses are remarkable and we want to enable them, but a few outlying cases are very costly. For example, one user consumed tens of thousands in model usage on the $200 plan. How is that even possible? There's a lot for us to learn about here, from the AI tools and how to abuse them, the way that they're priced, the way the whole economy around this is going to shift over time, and how to get the most of the money you're spending. That all said, someone's got to cover my inference bills. So quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. It's pretty well established that AI is good at writing code. My teams are shipping faster than ever, but that also means they have more PRs than ever. Thankfully, it turns out that when done right, AI is actually good at code review as well. That's why I've fallen in love with today's sponsor, CodeRabbit. When these guys first hit me up to sponsor, I was skeptical, so I set it up in my projects. I expected my team to be iffy on it and maybe get some useful info, and then I would use it, see if it's fine, recommend it to a few of you guys, and move on with my life. That is not how it went. CodeRabbit quickly became one of the most useful parts of our stack. I've fallen in love with the product. I've tried a lot of others, and CodeRabbit still leaves the best reviews. And most importantly, I love them so much that I beg them to let me invest because I know they're going to be around for a long time. It's also improved so much since I first started talking about them and using them. They now have VS Code extension that will do reviews right when you save files and commit. It's so nice. But honestly, what I like them for is putting up a PR before I bug my team about it. When I ship code, I put up the PR, I mark it as ready, but I don't send it to my team until it's actually ready because CodeRabbit's going to review it in under 5 minutes and leave a bunch of useful comments. Here's one where it's calling me out for doing something stupid with values. Obviously, that's a reasonable comment. But here it's catching actual potential bugs. It noticed, due to the way I wrote this condition for the migration for T3 chat, that it could infinite loop. And instead of just letting me get away with it, it made a refactor suggestion. Said add safety checks to prevent infinite loops with guides on how to do it, and a one-click committable suggestion that I can go down here and then click commit on. But none of that's my favorite thing. My favorite thing is that I no longer feel like I'm burdening my team with my code reviews. I can't tell you how many times when I put up a PR, the first review pass was go fix these 3 typos and this one thing that you did wrong and this one bug. And then I do it, and then they can do the real review where they try to understand it. That step that you almost have to do during review where you're combing every line, making sure the line is correct, that's what AI is good at. Tedious bullshit. You shouldn't be code reviewing for syntax. You shouldn't be code reviewing for weird infinite loops. You should be code reviewing so you understand what the code does and you know the code's doing what it's supposed to. And my code review process has gotten way better when I read other people's code because I don't have to look for these small syntactical things anymore. I still can't believe how much I love CodeRabbit. I have a feeling you will too. Check them out today at soydev.link/CodeRabbit. So for those who haven't been keeping up, quick TLDR of what happened. Step 1, Anthropic releases 3.5 Sonnet, which was a revolution in tool calling capabilities, as well as being slightly better than the previous models were at code. That combo made it really easy for people to build good agentic code tools. So Cursor, Windsurf, and more build awesome agentic code stuff around 3.5 Sonnet. This continues to grow and expand, and for many reasons internally, they decided Anthropic to build their own CLI tool for doing code with Anthropic models. So Claude Code is made to help internally at Anthropic. I'll put a 3.5 point here because they decided to release it even though they were hesitant because they were scared it was their secret sauce, which in retrospect is kind of funny. Then 0.4 slowly grows. 0.5, the creators of Claude Code were Boris and Kat Wu. They leave for Cursor. Around the same time that they finally leave and start at Cursor, Claude Code explodes in popularity. It feels like the growth for Claude Code was a very weird curve where it slowly got more and more popular until it blew up. And around the time they left, it started blowing up in popularity and, more importantly, in abuse. I'm going to bump that to 6.5 because there's an important 0.6 here, which is that Anthropic added a new sub-tier for Claude Code usage. That was the $200 a month max tier. Before then, Claude Code would just use the API billing, so whatever inference was done, you would just pay for the raw token cost. In case you're not familiar with how these costs work, the way most AI is priced from official APIs is through input and output tokens. A token's a chunk of inference that AI did. It's usually 3 to 6 characters. It's how the text you give it is broken up, and it's how the text it sends to you is generated. It's a next token prediction model. So when it has a bunch of tokens, it guesses what the most likely next one is, and that's how AI generates responses. As such, the output tokens tend to be a lot more expensive than input, but both of these are much more expensive than a lot of other options. I've not been doing a good job of keeping my model prices page up to date. There's a lot of little changes I need to make because things have changed in price, and ChatGPT 4.5 is dead now. But I want to emphasize just how expensive Claude models are compared to a lot of other things. Like O3 Mini and O4 Mini are $1.10 in and $4.40 out versus Claude 4, $3 in and $15 out. I love this type of chart, intelligence versus price. This shows the gap in how much the models cost to generate tokens versus the intelligence scores that artificial analysis has through all their benchmarking. And you can see here that models like Claude 4 Opus and O3 Pro are much more expensive than models like Gemini 2.5 and Grok 4, except that this is just the cost per token. This isn't the cost to actually run things. If we scroll down here, you'll see how different the costs actually are when they run the benchmark. GPT 4.1 can run the whole benchmark for $65. And here's another fun fact. Gemini 2.0 Flash can run the whole thing for $3. 2.5 Flash costs over 100 times more because the output tokens are more expensive and the reasoning generates more tokens. That's the biggest thing to know. Different models generate different amounts of tokens for the work that they're doing. I was actually trying to figure out how efficient and inefficient different models are in T3 chat because we noticed that the Grok bill was higher than it should be based on the token costs. And sure as shit, Grok 4 will just generate insane amounts of tokens per response. This is the average number of output tokens per message sent on T3 chat. And Grok 4 averages over 2,000 tokens of generation. Even if the user only sees like 2 sentences, all of the reasoning generation that's being done that the user doesn't get still costs money. And that generation is super inefficient and tends to be quite expensive. And Grok 4 just absolutely eats tokens, and that's why it costs as absurdly much as it does, and that's why it's one of the most expensive models on the artificial analysis intelligence bench. It costs half as much as O3 Pro does because it's so inefficient with its token gen. And if you compare that to something like O3, which is in a lot of ways a better model, for under a third the price, that's a pretty good deal. Because again, it's not just the input-output costs, it's the amount of output that you're being billed on. And if you look at the intelligence versus cost to run here, it's a very different chart and nothing is in this top left quadrant anymore because there isn't anything that is that smart, but is also relatively cheap to run because all these models get way more expensive when you realize how many tokens they're actually generating for those responses. As such, it was very kind of Anthropic to introduce a subscription tier so you weren't spending hundreds of dollars doing this generation yourself. I had run single commands in Claude Code that cost like $12 to $15 for like one change, and those changes weren't even good and I had to throw them out. And since Claude Code has to use exclusively Anthropic models because it's by them and it's closed source, they can't take advantage of other cheaper models for doing things like traversing the code base and figuring out how to solve a problem. They do use their cheaper model, which is Claude 3 Haiku, which is not a very good model, so it's not very good at that part. Regardless, because they added this $200 tier, a lot of people started using Claude Code. They're thinking something that made a lot of sense. $200 a month? Cool, that's going to be fully unlimited then. What I've noticed is that there's a lot of power users who are looking for a one payment, unlimited access type thing. Their expectation is that there's a dollar amount that is high enough that they can not have to worry about usage anymore. And now that they're seeing that $200 a month isn't enough, a lot of them are responding with, fine, just make it $2,000 then. Bad news, if you think a $2,000 a month tier is a reasonable cost for what you're doing, you cost a lot more than $2,000 and it makes no sense at all. I still remember not long ago when Sam Altman posted that the $250 tier on OpenAI was actually costing them money because the users who subscribe to that tier tend to do way more generation. You get the idea. So point 7, Boris and Kat go back. You can speculate all you want, but I honestly believe this is because when they left, Claude Code wasn't growing that fast, and then they saw it growing super fast. They saw the writing on the wall for how it could possibly be destroyed, and they wanted to save it and care about it because like they built it, it's their baby, and they went back to do that. Totally understand why that would happen, even if it seems really dramatic externally. And around the same time, people start showing off their crazy abuse of Claude Code. I grabbed some of my favorite examples of this I want to show off. We have McKay Wrigley here, who's running a Mac Mini that he calls the Claude Pewter. It just runs 24/7 and does whatever it wants. It has complete control of the computer.
As you guys can see here, this is Claude Pewter. So this is an instance of Claude Code here that is just running on its own Mac Mini. So this Mac Mini, Claude has complete control over. It's just running Claude 4 Opus in an infinite loop basically. And Claude can do whatever it wants. So just to show you some of the stuff it's done already, it's like tried doing some compositions. You can see it's like wrote some music here. You can see it built a Python program to basically create time capsules so that in the future it can serve as time capsules to itself. It has full permission to edit its claude.md file. So you can see it's kind of taken some notes about its system. So you can see some of the stuff it's done here. But it's done a lot of stuff. I'm trying, like you can see it even is like doing a dream journal. So I'm still kind of messing around with this. But the entire point is that this Mac Mini is going to be on 24/7. Claude Code can do whatever it wants. This is Claude's computer. It's its home. So if anybody has any ideas they want me to test.
You get the idea. He's running a computer, generating an endless amount of tokens. Not necessarily practical, but absolutely funny. Then there is people like Zach Jackson, who is one of my favorite developers. He's the one making micro front-ends viable in the modern web dev world. And he has been running Claude Code a ton. Apparently, he was using 4,000 to 5,000 tokens a day of inference on the $200 tier. This is the list of the things he did last week. He ported TSLint, all of it, to Go, including all of the rules. He compiled a Linux kernel to WASM for the browser. He fixed a bunch of GitHub issues. He did some experiments on RSPack, which is his Rust-based Webpack alternative. He split up 100,000 line of code PR into smaller parts and tested all of them. He wrote a bunch of docs and architecture specs, and he decompiled a 10 megabyte Minify.js file. Insanity. And this is just all running in a cluster of computers, all hitting Claude Code. And the amount of inference he's doing a day probably costs more than all of the computers he's using combined. It's insane. And he's one of many who are doing this. You might think this is just one or two people. It's not. According to Anthropic, it's less than 5%, but they didn't say less than 1%, which means that's a large number of people doing this type of abuse. Like, think about that. I know it sounds small, but if there are 100 people using Claude Code, and 5 of them are abusing it. That's a large number of people, but there aren't 100 people using Claude Code. There are hundreds of thousands of them, which means there are thousands of people who were abusing Claude Code, and those people will now have to either pay way more or go find another tool to freeload on. You could argue this is a new era of ZIRP, the zero interest rate phenomena, everyone's favorite buzzword. This term came to be when there were really low interest rates during COVID, which resulted in a lot of places that had a ton of money taking more risks with the money. Because if you can't just hold the money and get 5% every year, it's worth throwing it at things that are riskier. And that's why there were tons of startups getting a lot of funding, which is why a lot of these startups that had almost no users and zero revenue had 40 to 50 employees. It's why something like Browser Company can have 130 plus employees despite not having any paying users. This feels ZIRP era in a lot of ways, and the reason is because these companies are willing to spend a lot of money to win over the users. You could almost argue this was an intentional move from Anthropic to make Claude Code more appealing to win a bunch of people over, and in that process, Boris and Kat were won back over too. And they chose to eat those costs in order to make Claude Code way more prolific, and it worked. If you see this as them spending millions of dollars to do marketing effectively, they won. But now they have to pay the toll for the actions that they've done, and they're looking at the bill and realizing how fucking screwed they are because the amount of inference they were offering was way too generous. I covered these numbers before. The previous limits were 200 requests every 5 hours, 960 a day, 100,000 tokens of input, 8,000 tokens of output, even though a given request could do a lot of back and forth, making that way higher. My napkin math estimates were that this would cost around $400 a day, and people were like, there's no way it costs that much. You're being dishonest here. Do you know what? You guys were right. I was wrong. Turns out you can actually do thousands of dollars of inference because they don't count a request as just one back and forth that hits these token limits. One request could actually do a lot of back and forth and generate hundreds of thousands of tokens of both input and output. So people were actually hitting thousands of dollars of inference a day. Quick disclosure, I'm an investor and advisor for a lot of the companies building these AI builder tools, so I have biases, account for that accordingly. Cursor is one of them. But at the same time, I also run an AI company that has crazy bills on Anthropic, so I know this deeper than almost anybody else. Account for my biases, but also account for the fact that I know what the fuck I'm talking about here, okay? Anyways, if you want to be a contributor to our absurd bill on Anthropic, I have a great way for you to do that. Check out T3 Chat. It's the only AI chat app that doesn't suck to use. You have access to every single model you would want and more for $8 a month. But if you really want to make us bleed and you haven't signed up yet, I threw a discount code, not unlimited, for a first-time sign-up to get the first month for just $1. That's 1,600 messages for $1. And you can even generate images with it. That's a pretty good deal. Check it out now at t3.chat. And back to the video. We should take a look at their actual announcement, though. Let's read through this quick. We're rolling out new weekly rate limits for Claude Pro and Max in late August. We estimate that they'll apply to less than 5% of subscribers based on current usage. Claude Code has seen unprecedented demand, especially as part of our Max plans. We'll continue to support this growth while we work on making Claude Code even better, but for now, we need to make some changes. Some of the biggest Claude Code fans are running it continuously in the background 24/7. These uses are remarkable, and we want to enable them, but a few outlying cases are very costly to support. For example, one user consumed tens of thousands in model usage on a $200 plan. In other cases, a small number of users are violating our usage policies by sharing and reselling accounts. This impacts capacity for all Claude users, and we're taking appropriate action to stop it. From August 28th onwards, we'll introduce a new weekly limit that will mitigate these problems while impacting as few customers as possible. We'll also support Max Plan users buying additional usage at standard API rates if they choose to. We're still exploring the best ways to ensure as broad access as possible to Claude Code. If you're a power user who has feedback on how we can support your use of Claude Code, we'd love to hear from you. And immediately the replies are, standard API pricing is too expensive. Turns out people don't want to pay the real cost of running these things. I'm not trying to imply that these costs aren't marked up some amount. They wouldn't be able to give discounts otherwise, but I am very, very strictly trying to explain that their actual costs are relatively high. In order to run these models, they need a lot of very expensive GPUs to solve very complex problems and use a ton of energy in the process. And if they're giving it to you for cheap, that's inference they can't give to somebody else for more money. They have these GPUs, they're being hit constantly. They regularly have issues trying to manage the sheer volume of traffic that they're getting. They don't want to give this out for free or for $200 that you're well past when they could be reselling that inference to other businesses, companies, people like me using it for T3 chat. Why would they give you $1,000 for $200 when they can give me $1,000 for $1,000? It just makes no sense. As such, the actual bills that you'll see if you get API pricing are not great. This is why all the outrage happened with Cursor. It's not because Cursor's evil or inefficient, and it's not even because Cursor doesn't make their own models. It's because Cursor's trying to make a business that won't collapse. And over time, their $20 a month tier didn't properly fit the things people were doing in the tool. They had to change accordingly. It's less excusable for Anthropic to make these mistakes because they watched all of this happen and they decided, I think $200 will be fine. It'll cover most things. And they were wrong. And now they're eating the PR hit that they kind of deserve for making that miscalculation. I don't think you guys understand how much code these things generate. This is Armin from Sentry. He tried to have it build a Sentry clone, and it generated absurd numbers of tokens. It took 8,700 seconds, over 2.5 hours, generated disgusting amounts of code, literally 25K lines of code, failed miserably, and this would have cost a disgusting amount of money. I don't even want to think about it. But he didn't have to pay for any of that. He just paid the $200 a month and could do something like this and then keep going afterwards. Kind of absurd. Thankfully, there are people who are discovering other options. I've found open code personally to be significantly cheaper, even using the same models from Claude. But there are other models too now that are really good as well. Qwen 3 Coder at 760,000 tokens of context can fix apps faster than Opus and is also significantly cheaper. Here it is with Klein using 500,000 tokens of context and blasting through it and generating results totally fine. I don't want to waste too much more time here, so I'm going to summarize the key points. If it's too good to be true, it's subsidized. So if something costs $400 in Cursor and it's $200 in Claude, one of those numbers is lying, and it's probably the one that's too cheap. If it's cheaper than API prices, it's marketing. The only reason Anthropic let Claude Code be this cheap is they wanted it to win. They wanted to have it go far in the market. And there's huge value in getting these extreme users to like what you're doing and use your thing. Even if it costs a ton of money to let them use your stuff, they'll be posting about it on Twitter. They'll be making content. They'll be distributing the value of what you're doing. So they get a lot for it, but it does cost them a lot. But it does also hit limits, like we saw now. And of course, the most important point, there is no such thing as unlimited in this world. In order for something to be unlimited, it has to not cost a lot of money on the provider's end. And AI costs a ton of money. There is no such thing as unlimited in a space that is limited by the amount of electricity and GPUs available. Nobody's actually going to give you unlimited access to those things for any amount of money, because eventually you will be able to blow past the amount that you spent and it no longer is a good deal. I think that's all I have to say on this one. Let me know what y'all think. Are you moving off Claude Code or are you accepting the new pricing? Let me know. And until next time, peace nerds.